Hello. In Efir, the evening news. Today in the country and the world, events occurred about which we will tell you. Turkmenistan has ceased delivery of gas to Ukraine. In Belarus, a meeting of the Strike Committee was held. The President of Russia met with the President of Kyrgyzstan and the President of Uzbekistan with the Chairman of the Supreme Soviet of Tajikistan. Tension remains on the Tajik-Afghan border. A meeting of the International Conference on Former Yugoslavia was held today in Germany. The school children have been released who were taken hostage in Pakistan. As of today, Russian athletes have won the largest number of gold Olympic medals. From regions of confrontation on the territory of the former USSR, special attention was devoted today by journalists again to the situation on the Tajik-Afghan border. It seems that predictions of Russian generals are being fulfilled about renewal of military activity on the border with the coming of spring. Today, the authorities of Tajikistan issued a protest to neighboring Afghanistan in connection with the unceasing attempts to destabilize the situation on the Tajik-Afghan border. Our correspondent, Alisher Khajaev, was on the border during combat. The tragically renowned 12th Border Outpost of the Moscow Border Regiment is again the center of attention, and more precisely, in the aim of the armed opposition groups based on the adjacent Afghan side. On the 21st of February, a mixed armed group of citizens commanded by Kori Hamidullo and gunmen of the Islamic Party of Regeneration of Tajikistan under the Mullah Abdurrahimov crossed the Panjshk River from the Badakhshan province and subjected to fire the 12th Border Outpost. Simultaneously, by rocket fire from the territory of Afghanistan, the villages Tsatsigor, Parvar, and other populated points were showered of the Shuravatsk direction. Military activity in the area of the 12th border post continued. 2 days ago, from the adjacent territories, the border troops near the village of Sredny Pernsk were fired at. There was destruction, and one Russian border troop was killed from injuries sustained. Beginning the 17th of February, firing and attacks on installations of the Moscow and Panjshk border outposts follow one after another. As a result of clashes, there are killed and injured among the border troops, military personnel of the Ministry of Defense of Tajikistan, and peaceful civilians. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic, in its note, announced a decisive protest to the Afghan side, noting that the Republic of Tajikistan reserves the right to take decisive measures, even to the point of annihilation of fire sources on Afghan territory. The situation in Tajikistan was discussed by politicians today. The President of Uzbekistan met with the Chairman of the Supreme Soviet of Tajikistan. Today in Tashkent, for a brief visit, arrived the Chairman of the Supreme Soviet of Tajikistan, Emomali Rakhmonov. In the Palace of Friendship, there was a meeting held with the President of Uzbekistan, Islam Karimov. They discussed the serious and painful problems of the economy of Tajikistan, which, according to the leaders of the countries, can only be overcome through a stable social-economic situation. As a result of the talks, they signed two-sided agreements on trade economic cooperation between Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. And yet the main questions after the signing of the documents at the press conference were questions of politics. Among them, the problem of the regularization of military conflicts on the Tajik-Afghan border and the attitude to the situation in Afghanistan. To these questions, the heads of both countries answered that they adhere to the policy of non-interference in the domestic affairs of Afghanistan, and the guarantor of stability in Tajikistan can only be the choice by this country of the democratic path of development. Islam Karimov said, as a whole, for the peace in the Central Asian region, necessary here is the presence of Russian peacekeeping forces. From the official meetings in Moscow, today journalists were most interested in the conversation of the presidents Yeltsin and Akayev. As Itatas reports, they discussed a broad circle of questions of two-sided cooperation. As Akayev stated that he brought a package of proposals on the resolution of the problem of immigration of Russians from Kyrgyzstan. He intends to present them at the March meeting of the heads of the CIS, since this is a common problem which concerns everyone. As Akayev also noted that despite the latest increase in price, the situation in his country is stable and calm, although Interfax reported today that the members of the Organizational Committee on the Defense of the Impoverished of Kyrgyzstan announced their intention to again demonstrate. Only strengthening the statehood of the Russian Federation can we heal sore areas of the regions. This was a statement made by the head of the administration of the President Sergei Filatov at a meeting of heads of the representatives of the Northern Caucasus, leaders of Don, Kuban, and Stavropol. This was in Zheleznovodsk. Participants of the meeting analyzed compliance with the decree of the President on regularization of the Osetino-Ingushetian conflict and also reasons causing realization of several positions of this document. According to the scant TASS report, the resolution of problems in this region is progressing very not simply. The sites noted that for the regularization of relations, despite all the complexity of the situation, there are sufficient peaceful means. Our path is the only one, and it leads to peace. The path is very difficult and long, but we must decisively proceed along it. One can understand that the current meeting is one more realistic, concrete step to achieve understanding and peace in the zone of the Osetino-Ingushetian conflict. Yes, I hope that this is so, because there were several such meetings, and after each meeting there were also hopes. I would like to only knock on wood and hope that the result is positive. Tomorrow in Ingushetia and in Chishna, it is a day of mourning. There they will commemorate the 50th anniversary of the deportation of the peoples of the Northern Caucasus. Today, by decree of the President of Russia, an order of the friendship of the people is bestowed upon the Patriarch of Moscow and all Russia, Alexei II. This honor is for great personal contributions into spiritual regeneration of Russia and active peacekeeping activities. Belarus. Today in Minsk, on Independence Square, again, a demonstration took place organized by the Republican Strike Committee. I'll remind you, on the 15th of February in this square, thousands of demonstrators gathered with the threat of a general political strike. The demands were to conduct early elections, the resignation of government structures. Then the general strike did not take place, and it was said that the question of early elections would be examined by the session of Parliament, which was to resume its work on the 22nd of February, that is today, and today in Belarus. Today on Independence Square in Minsk, they expected the continuation of the strike demonstration begun the 15th of February on the initiation of the Republican Strike Committee, the Independent Union and Belarusian National Front. However, the 1,500 demonstrators who gathered did not grow into a massive manifestation of laborers, demanding the resignation of government, suspension of parliament, and the setting of a date for the new elections of the Supreme Soviet. The latter coincides with the demand of the Federation of the Unions of the Republic. Today, after a break in their session, the national deputies did not rush to answer the voice of the people and began to discuss their agenda. Today, for the first time since his removal in Parliament, its ex-chairman appeared, Stanislav Shishkevich, who, from another point of view, today can assess the work of the Supreme Soviet. The opinion of the minority doesn't want to listen to Parliament. The overwhelming majority is the old communist structure elected during the reign of the Communist Party of Belarus. Very productively, the parliamentary majority decided three leading questions. Three generals occupied high posts. The Minister of Internal Affairs is Vladimir Zenko, the chairman of the KGB, Gennady Levitsky, the chairman of the Commission of the Supreme Soviet on National Security and the Battle with Crime, Anatoly Novikov. They have been appointed. Elected also the new deputy chairman of the Supreme Soviet, Ivan Bambiza. The government of Turkmenistan adopted a decision of full discontinuation as of today of gas delivery to Ukraine. This was announced at the emergency session of the Cabinet of Ministers. The reason is understandable: unfulfillment of obligations and payments, and Ukraine is one of the greatest debtors. Its debt for 1993 was $70 million American. In Kiev today, there was a session of the Supreme Soviet underway. On what questions were examined, our correspondent will tell us. It's time for the deputies of Ukrainian Parliament to exchange addresses and photographs as souvenirs, for there is almost more than 1 month left before the new elections, and not wishing to leave their successors in this auditorium unfinished business, the deputies ratified for the next week a very full agenda consisting of 50 points. 28 of them propose the introduction of changes, amendments and additions into earlier adopted laws. which must be obviously improved, or they have apparently been recognized as being incomplete, or simply because unpredictable is our fast-flowing life. And yet, of priority among the 50 questions in the agenda are recognized as the first usual report of the government on overcoming the social economic crisis, specifically the overcoming of the payment crisis in domestic business, and after that, the adoption of the law on elections into local Soviets, and also the question on does the Constitution of the Republic of Crimea correspond with the laws and Constitution of Ukraine? And now about the economy of Russia. A few brief words, first of all, and then the report of our correspondent. Information reported by post factum on the work stoppage of the reactor in the Belebinsk nuclear plant does not correspond to reality. This is the affirmation of the company Rosenergoatom, and also they admit that at the nuclear plant the difficult situation has developed caused by non-paid salaries to workers since December of last year. Uraltransgaz temporarily has deferred its decision to disconnect industries in the Chelyabinsk district from the system of gas supply. Therefore, according to information of Vitartas, the largest plants in the region continue to work in a normal schedule. But to stop the collapse of the economy, under such rubrics in Chelyabinsk newspapers is published an open letter which was addressed to the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, and the Chairman of the government, Viktor Chernomyrdin, by the general directors of the largest companies of the southern Ural area. The head directors of the giant plants ask to take immediate measures to preserve their industrial potential and the employability of labor collectives and the prevention of possible social cataclysms in the region. The products of the Chelyabinsk plants, it says in the letter, are in high demand in Russia and in near foreign countries. However, because of the mass non-payment capabilities of customers, the companies can't realize their products. But for sold goods, payments circulate in banks for months. With the coming of the new year, the goods producer has received a new blow in the form of additional taxes and increased taxation levels. With each day, it is more difficult to produce, and deceptively lucrative is to engage in purchase and sale, to flourish through money and valuable paper operations. Unless the producers' burdens are alleviated, further collapse of the economy will be impossible to stop. The general directors of the South Ural companies ask the leaders of the country to immediately examine and decide at a government level the question on payment of debts for already delivered goods on government orders, the expedition of mutual payments, and to supply discount credits through the conversion programs and other measures capable, in their opinion, of delivering the industry of Russia from crisis. The fuel energy crisis in Primorye appears to have reached its climax. Although the administration of the area did everything possible to somehow ameliorate the situation of the miners, allotting to them from the state reserve both food and money, yet a series of the coal-producing companies of the region nevertheless have stopped working. The demand of the miners is to fully complete salary payments and to allot to Primorye the government-promised means for the development of the fuel energy sector. For now, at the electrical stations and at the heating centers of the area, there are 270,000 tons of coal, 4 times less than the basic minimum necessary. This has led to the decrease of heating being supplied to homes and the increase in their number of disconnections. Especially hard hit are industrial companies. For example, the Vladivostok division of the railways was forced to convert part of its passenger and cargo trains from electrical to steam drive. And beginning today, by 2 times there has been a reduction of the number of suburban electric trains. The concept of government refusal to regulate the economic and social processes resulted in a general loss of control. This was the conclusion made by specialists of the International Fund of Reforms. Often declining government structures of control was preceded by the creation of new ones. As a result, there was a vacuum of government regularization, which is increasingly being filled. What should the new level of Russian reforms be like when all business life of the country is disorganized by inflation? In the search of an answer to this difficult question, forming a club of directors are the Union of Russian Industrialists and Entrepreneurs and the Higher School of Privatization, Professor Koshkin, experienced industrialists, young businessmen, and famous economists, theoreticians, and practitioners from ministries and committees of the State Duma. And their aim is to help help with tangible advice to help the government correct domestic business. Lately, they are beginning to hear this opinion of the people. I'm convinced in the effectiveness of such meetings. Specialists state inflation can't be overcome unless there is conscientious payment of taxes, but not such highway robbery ones. A firm financial policy is needed, just as maximum effective investments, so that they should be directed into projects which yield a far greater return than the investment of cash. Not to increase, but to decrease taxes which exist. Every company which is on its feet will find investments for its development. But to get on your feet today, feel both from the practical and theoretical points of view, one must seriously learn how to drive. And now the financial news. The rate of the dollar at trading today in the Moscow Interbank Currency Exchange again grew. It was fixed at the rate of 1,585 rubles. This is 12 rubles higher than yesterday's indicator. And the central bank today at a press conference told about its new initiative, which in a few days will be incorporated into life. Just now, in the Central Bank of Russia, a sensational news was heard. On the 28th of February, the first credit auctioning will be held. The first conditions for participation of commercial banks in the auction, they must have no debts. At the press conference, the deputy chairman of the Central Bank of Russia, Alexander Khandroyev, stated, for the auction, 70 billion rubles will be conveyed. The term of crediting is 3 months. The volume will be defined by demand. In March, it is expected to conduct a second credit auction with a volume of credit of 60 billion rubles. In this initiation of the central bank, there is much new, even for the financiers. For our television viewers, we'll explain that if previously creditation in domestic business was conducted as a rule only by a decision of party or government, now the credit auction must become another step toward the market. It is good if the credits will be applied to productivity, since hope for financial stability without overcoming the decline in productivity can be justified, just as our hopes for the decrease in the tempos of inflation. Although the rich can rejoice to learn that prices on automobiles in Manege have been lowered. Today, as yesterday, for many, very many people, the acquisition of an automobile was only a hope. It was too expensive, but for someone, this hope has come closer. Lagavas announced the reduction on prices on domestic automobiles. I phoned and visited almost 20 Moscow firms and companies which are engaged in the sale of domestic Zhigulis and clarified that Lagavas prices are significantly lower than other prices. First of all, we don't want to lose our purchasers for whom today the ruble prices on automobiles are out of reach. And the second reason why we must lower our prices, that is not to freeze our own funds. This is how real businessmen function, who work with perspective rather than for a one-time profit. As we reported previously, on the night of Monday on the military airport of the Russian troops in Estonia, an attack on servicemen on duty took place. With details today, Hamer Link. The airport Hemeri is located 40 kilometers from Tallinn, and it is the last airport in Estonia which belongs to the Russian aviation. The attack on the control inspection point occurred at 2:40 in the morning. At 3:10, the event was informed to the police of the local district. An enforced brigade, together with fire personnel, arrived at the location. At night, at the KPP, 2 unarmed military servicemen were on duty, an officer and a private of the Russian army. The masked attackers were 5 in number. They forced the military personnel to lie down in the snow and set fire to the KPP building. In relation to the military personnel, there was no other violence used. The attackers were armed with a pistol, a semi-automatic rifle, and a hunting rifle. According to information from the Russian embassy in Tallinn, the airport had been for some time guarded jointly by Russian and Estonian divisions. However, recently, the Estonian side removed its guard. In the Republican press, often there were opinions expressed that the airport in Hammer was used by organized crime gangs to export contraband. However, concrete proof has not been published to date. Today, the State Assembly of Estonia called the parliament and the country to achieve a condemnation of Russia for the occupation of Estonia by the Soviet Union. That is, they're talking about the rebirth of the Tartus peace accord of 1920. From a neighboring country, as the Tartas reports, Boris Yeltsin sent a letter to the President of the Latvian Republic, Guntis Ulmanis, in which he expresses serious concern with discrimination on a national basis underway in Latvia. If the project of the agreement on the transportation of military cargoes through the territory of Lithuania must be discussed still, all passenger trains to Kaliningrad already are passing through the Republic with a stop only at remote stations with the aim of replenishing water and fuel. However, this doesn't mean that on Russian trains Lithuanian citizens or citizens of other countries with Lithuanian visas won't be able to travel. The passengers are permitted to disembark in Vilnius, Kaunas, border stations Kena and Ikibata, and if they use separate connecting wagons, which in Lithuania are accompanied by border troops. Those who have used special transit wagons will not be inspected by either Lithuanian border nor customs officials. The Yugoslavian problem is, as previously, the center of attention of international sources of mass media. But today in Sarajevo, luckily, it was more or less calm. And for the first time in a long time, one could see children and adults with sleds. And one wants very much to return to a normal life, starting with trifles. However, NATO planes last night conducted reconnaissance flights over Sarajevo. They continued them today, although, however, officially the possibility of an air attack on the positions of Bosnian Serbs around the city was deferred. In the meantime, the leaders of the foreign political departments of the European Union, the USA, Canada and Russia discussed further possibilities to regulate the crisis in former Yugoslavia. Naturally, it is far from accomplished. After 10 days, which forced the world to worry, after all the trepidations connected with the NATO ultimatum in Bosnia, all are asking the same question: what will we do next? With the aim of discussing future actions of the Western countries, the UN and Russia today in Bonn, on the initiative of the Federal Republic of Germany, gathered the high-placed diplomats. A common position is necessary now when two principal approaches are considered. France, Italy, Netherlands, Belgium already have expressed themselves for the distribution of the successful military pressure, like in Sarajevo, to other areas of Bosnia to mold the steel while it is hot. In Sarajevo, they are not shooting any longer, but there still is Tuzla, Gorazde, Mostar, Srebrenica, other countries, including Russia and Germany, for political efforts so that in a peaceful key they could use the positive effect of the ultimatum. Skeptics, however, note that during the 22 months of the Sarajevo blockade, all dialogues led to nothing, and the threat of a bomb attack immediately affected the Serbs. Today, in the local press, they state that the broad-scale plans of the spring invasion by Bosnian Muslims, who intend apparently to conquer territories for themselves prior to the conclusion of peace, will they, in the hopes of bombing of Serb positions, blockade the peace process. And so the Bonn meeting has ended. Vitaly Churkin was the first who emerges to meet the press. Vitaly Ivanovich, what approach was pursued at this meeting? It was exclusively a political approach, not a forceful approach. I'm very satisfied with the meeting. It confirmed that the only way to resolve the Bosnian problem is joint political work of the Europeans, Russians, and Americans. All of this was confirmed again. There were no attempts to derail the matter onto narrow, forceful, ultimative decisions. It was a good political discussion. The Bonn meeting didn't have a name as a detailed discussion of the military aspect of the Bosnian regularization. Tomorrow in Brussels, NATO will do this. Interesting, what will be the approach of the military? Today, the aide of the President of Russia on foreign policy questions told our correspondent about the position of Russia in this question being discussed by the entire world. How will Russia further develop its diplomatic initiative in this region? Russia hasn't ceased its initiatives and will continue to very actively develop them further. The issue will be to create a stable, peaceful situation in Sarajevo, that is to deblockade this region and give it possibly over under the administration of the United Nations, and later to reach an agreement on similar actions in other security zones on the territory of Bosnia. And these must be peaceful, diplomatic, political solutions. And after that, we must activate and very highly activate the process of political regularization of the problem of Bosnia as a whole. That is, we are speaking about on the basis of the plan of the European Union, with some possible specifications, to immediately achieve regularization, to cease all military activity. What happened, or more precisely didn't happen in Sarajevo, many rushed to term a success of joint efforts of the UN, NATO and Russia. The bombing of Serb positions did not take place. Perhaps this was because of cooperation of Russia and the USA, but probably the reverse. For the White House and the State Department, the Russian initiative was fully unexpected. It seemed that that was all. The signal from Moscow on the undesirability of bombing was ignored. The NATO clock began to tick, and President Clinton warns the Americans about the seriousness of the situation. Now, on an official level, the actions of Russia are welcomed. In the corridors and in the press, they discuss who beat whom. Temper your joy. The Russians are again on the arena of world politics. An article in the influential paper, The New York Times. Russia's Balkan card. This is a not less influential paper, The Washington Post. Similar assessments with an opposite message are sufficient in our Russian press. In America, they like to repeat the phrase, appropriate for politics. Only two can dance the tango. It's difficult to disagree with this, only on the condition, of course, that your partner doesn't step on your toes. For this, one must still traverse a long path of mutual understanding. Lately, contacts on various levels between Russia and the United States on the finding of a mutually acceptable solution have been increased. The telephone consultations of the presidents of Russia and the USA and the ministers of defense of both countries. All of this possibly will lead to the finding of a firm formula for the regularization in former Yugoslavia, which would contribute to closer positions of the involved sides. Today in Geneva, another round of talks on the regularization of the Georgian-Abkhazian conflict began. They are under the auspices of the UN with the cooperation of Russia. They will again examine the heated question of the return of refugees and continue discussions to strengthen the measures of trust and security. The stumbling block is the problem of the state and political status of Abkhazia. The Georgian delegation is headed by the Member of Parliament, Java Silyani. The Abkhaz is headed by the Chairman of the Soviet Minister, Sokrat Janjoli. In the talks participating is the Special Representative of the Secretary General of the UN, Edward Brunner, and the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Boris Pastukhov. In Mexico, talks began between the rebels and the Separatist Army of National Liberation and the authorities on the settling of the conflict in the state of Chiapas. The main aim of the dialogue is to find civilized and respectable decisions to the questions posed by the rebels in the interests of common peace. The Pakistani commandos stormed and seized the bus in which were located terrorists and the hostages held by them. All the terrorists were killed. The hostages are safe. This was a successful operation, said the representative of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Pakistan. Among the commandos, there were no injuries, he said. Before humanity, a new threat has arisen, a water deficit, and this will lead to the problem of food production, says in the report of the Secretary General of the UN, Boutros Ghali. In order to satisfy the demands in food for the planet's population, the number of which by the year 2000 is expected to, reach 6 billion people, the annual rate of growth of rural productivity will have to be increased by 2%. Australia voiced itself against commercial whaling and supported the proposal of creating, for the world's largest mammals, a sanctuary in the world's oceans with an area of 47 million square kilometers. This was stated at a work meeting of the International Whaling Commission. It is amazing, this ancient Lipetsk land, mentioned in historical writings from the time of Kievan Rus as a large city on the river overgrown with linden trees and called Lipovka, famous in the times of Peter for metal factories, famous today with the largest European metallurgical plant. And thank God for now breathing from some of its domes. But the main wealth is the spiritual wealth of the area, enlightened by Pushkin, Lermontov, Bunin, and Lev Tolstoy, who died on this land. and in whose name the Lipovsky Dramatical Theatre is called, opening its first season on the 15th of June in 1921. In this theatre, for the 9th year in a row, there is the traditional Lipetsk theatrical meeting, which is attended by theatrical activists from the entire world, dedicated to the creativity of our great playwrights, the history of the theatre, and this time to the memory of Vladimir Lakshin, the famous scientist, critic, writer, who stood at the source of these meetings, and traditional theatre in the provinces, which follows the Lipetsky Dramatical Society. And during this time, the main thing is to preserve one's inner peace and preserve within oneself an eternal quality. And with our last strength, we strive to preserve on the stage of the local theater, to preserve the Russian word, classics, all the most elevated, as if chosen by time, all these elements. Ostrovsky, Tolstoy, and Chekhov, to whom the theater turns every year. All their plays are performed here, and these days the premiere of the colorful stories of Chekhov prose was being presented. For these productions, audiences come from abroad. They discover Chekhov for us, teach us humanity, compassion, and give great moral support. We're happy that despite difficult times in Russia, some traditions are preserved. But with regret, we must state that we are not seen in all regions of the Commonwealth of Independent States. Today, the question of the broadcasting and television company Ostankino was discussed at a session of the Odessa District Council. The regular session of the Odessa District Council of National Deputies began unusually. Today, we know the channels of Ukrainian television are operating in full, but Ostankino is not working. We must today discuss this question and today present our demands to the Cabinet of Ministers in the form of an appeal. The session of the District Soviet on the adoption of a decision of full-scale broadcasting of Channel 1 of Russian television, Ostankino. After the discussion, the appeal to the government of Ukraine, the deputies described its decision in the restriction of television broadcasting in morning and daytime hours as economically unfounded and politically harmful, especially in view of the pre-election campaign. Calling the Cabinet of Ministers to remove the unjustified bans, the deputies refused to support their radical colleagues, demanding the renewal of full broadcasting, not awaiting the decision of Kiev. We'd like that the television screen would unite us as previously, and we still have time to tell us not about the important, but about the curious as well. Imagine, today in France, a birthday was celebrated by a lady who turned 119 years old. Women don't like to talk about their age, especially if they're stars. Zhanna Kalman is an exception, probably because she became a star exclusively because of her age. She is 119 years old today. France doesn't stop to be amazed at her. She has outlived 17 presidents and often remembers Van Gogh, whom she somehow met in her native village, Orlel. It's curious, 2 years ago she gave up her 2 daily cigarettes, and the hobbies of Zhanna Kalman are piano and sketching. And with this, that is all the information I have. I thank you for your attention. I wish you all the best, and goodbye. Illuminated by Olympic fire, the 17th Winter Games, which started enthusiastically, have covered most of their distance, and just as enthusiastically are in the finish stretch. Inspiration, that's how one can briefly assess the dance of Oksana Khryshchuk and Evgeny Platov. A few more seconds and the Moscow dancers were for the first time Olympic champions. The Russian Evening of Dances on Ice in Hammer was decorated by one more duo, Maya Usova and Alexander Zhulin. And forced to agree with the success were the brilliant English skaters Jane Torgo and Christopher Din. They won the bronze medal. For me, it was very important that my team should win because I competed myself with them and won in 1980. And now I very much wanted to prove that the Russian school, after 10 and 20 years and after many years, would still be the best school in the world. It is such a real joy. We just can't believe that we're holding a gold medal, and we don't believe it. We went so long toward this goal. It was our greatest hope in sports. And finally, We've become Olympic champions. The Great Cup with the Olympic flame on the hill Lutsgardsbakken. At its foot is the sea of Norwegian flags, skis, a Norwegian invention, and an undisputed claim of that country. It's not for nothing they say a Norwegian is born with skis on his feet. The relay is an Olympic lottery, but who can challenge the undefeated Norwegian team? And again, it was only inspiration. And the inspiration of the Italian Cyril Fare, who passed Bjorn Deli himself, placed the Italians in first place. Our team is in fifth place. The Japanese flying skiers, who will be the hosts of the next games in Ragon, have already held the gold medal for the tournament. Their hopes were dashed by the Olympic champion from Germany, Jens Weissflok. Here, there really is mastery and inspiration. From the Olympic Television Radio Center, ABC, specially for Channel 1 News, Anatoly Malevin. Russia has 9 gold medals. It's simply overwhelming, and that's not everything. Now, with medals, my colleague, Dmitry Kisilov. Probably news for coin collectors. The explorer of the South Pole, Roald Amundsen, is depicted on the Olympic gold medal issued by the Norwegian Bank. This series is worth 1,500 Norwegian krones, and now the banks sell them for a price in a minimum of 3 times more. The issue of the coins, says a representative of the specially organized for this time Olympic Bank, is 15,000 of gold ones, but also silver ones were issued. There are 60,000 of them at a value of 50 and 100 Norwegian krones, but that is only if you intend to buy them in stores. In the meantime, among world collectioners, a hunt has begun, and they name higher figures.
Это скорость взаиморасчетов. Единая сеть – это колоссальные денежные ресурсы. Единая сеть – это возможность погашения взаимных долгов предприятий. Единая сеть – это единственный путь к успеху. Тверь Универсал Банк.
Добрый вечер.
Good evening. Tomorrow, the weather in the northern regions of Russia will be defined by a cyclone, which is moving from the Barents Sea. In Karelia, Arkhangelsk district, in the west of the Nenetsk Autonomous District, and the north of the Volgovyatsk region, it will be cloudy weather with snow, snowstorms, and gusts of wind. In the cyclone, the air will be quite warm. Therefore, at night it will be -10, -15. During the day, -3, -8. On the coast of the Kolsk Peninsula, it will be from 0 to -5. In the eastern regions of Komi and the Nenetsk Autonomous District, it will still be in a cold air mass. At night, -35, -40. During the day, -32, 37. The northwest and central areas of Russia, and also Estonia and Latvia, will be under a high-pressure area. Therefore, there will be no change in the weather, and it will be intermittently cloudy as previously without precipitation. In the morning and night hours, there will be fog in places. The temperatures at night, -12, 17. During the day, -4. In the Kaliningrad and Lithuanian area, the cyclone will come from the west and influence the weather there. Cloudiness will increase. There will be precipitation in places. The temperature 0, -5. In the lower and central Volga, and also in the eastern and northern regions of Ukraine and Belarus, it will be intermittent cloudiness without precipitation. During the night, -12, -17. During the day, along the Volga, -8, -13. In the north of Ukraine and Belarus, from 0 to -5. In the Krasnodarsk area and northern Caucasus, and also the south and western areas of Ukraine and Belarus, will be in an area of an atmospheric front. Here it will be cloudy with some precipitation. During the night, -0.5. During the day, 0 +5. In the countries beyond the Caucasus, in areas there will be precipitation. During the day, the temperatures will reach +7. In Petersburg, intermittent cloudiness without precipitation. The winds are from the southwest. During the night, -9, 11. During the day, -4, -6. In Moscow, also intermittent cloudiness without precipitation. The winds are from the south. During the night and morning hours, there will be fog. During the night, -12, -14. During the day, -3, -5. This is the weather for tomorrow by the Oceanic Meteorological Center of Russia.